The 1960s, swinging kitchens and changing tastes. The 1960s were a time of great change. The post-war austerity was giving way to a new era of optimism, and this was reflected in the school dinners. 2. New world foods started appearing on British plates, thanks to an influx of Caribbean and African immigrants who brought with them the vibrant tastes of home. Kitchens experimented with spices and introduced dishes like rice and beans, curries, and new fruits, but this wasn't always a smooth transition. Not every school embraced these changes as enthusiastically as others. Some traditionalists saw these new foods as a threat to British cuisine. They yearned for the simpler days of meat and veg. In the midst of this culinary clash, a battle was being fought between progress and tradition. It was the era of miniskirts and the I did it my way attitude. Even school dinners were affected. Children started bringing packed lunches from home, a trend that grew as the decade progressed. By 1969, the introduction of school milk was a big deal. It was seen as a quick and easy source of calcium, especially for those who didn't get enough at home. For many kids, though, it was a bit of a chore. Having to drink it at break time or during dinner wasn't exactly exciting. The 1970s, a time of experimentation and crisis. The 1970s was a turbulent time in Britain. The country faced economic crises, 3-day weeks, and industrial unrest. But one thing that never wavered was the commitment to free school meals for all. Despite the financial challenges, the government made sure that no child went hungry. This was a testament to the belief that education and nourishment went hand in hand. School kitchens were a microcosm of the times. On one hand, there was a desire to experiment with new global flavors. On the other, a strong sense of nostalgia for traditional British cooking. Take, for example, the Jamaican-style curries that started appearing on school menus. These dishes were a hit, with some schools even holding Caribbean Day celebrations. Yet at the same time, classics like Spotted Dick and Toad in the Hole remained popular. There was a tug-of-war between the old and the new, with school dinners often playing host to both. 1980s, a pinch of Thatcher and a dash of Del Monte. The 1980s brought a new conservative government. Under Margaret Thatcher, a time when frugality and tradition were highly regarded, school dinners became a battleground between the government's desire to cut costs and the need to provide nutritious meals. Enter the infamous Thatcher Bites, or Margaret's meatballs. As they were affectionately known, these were a cheap and easy source of protein. However, they weren't exactly a hit with the kids. The truth is, though, that these weren't the most atrocious school dinners of the era. Thanks to the introduction of microwave ovens in some schools, it was possible to heat up more varied and interesting meals. Pizza and chips, anyone? But it was far from all good. As the decade wore on, concerns about nutrition and the rising cost of ingredients led to some less than appetizing meals. Remember the fish fingers that tasted suspiciously like chicken and the mysterious gray mush that accompanied them? Yep, those were the days. 1990s, the cauldron of diversity. The 1990s saw Britain become a melting pot of cultures, and this diversity was reflected in school cafeterias across the country. Foods from India, China, and the Caribbean were now commonplace. Kids got a taste of samosas, sweet and sour chicken, and jerk chicken. This wasn't just about adding variety to the menu. It was about introducing young minds to different cultures. Many schools even celebrated Bring Your Lunch Box Days, where children shared food from their own cultures. It was a chance to learn about other traditions while also broadening young palates. But amidst this global feast, some things remained constant. A good old-fashioned Sunday roast was still a treat, and who could forget the humble baked potato with its endless topping possibilities? Throughout the decades, school dinners played a vital role in shaping childhood memories. From the austerity of the 1950s to the multiculturalism of the 1990s, each era left its mark on the lunch boxes and dinner halls of Britain. Remember the food you ate at school? What do these dishes say about the times you lived in? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more mouth-watering journeys through time. Until next time, keep revisiting the past. There's a story I'd like to start with, a story from 1955. Let us imagine a young boy named John. He lived in Birmingham, and like most working-class children, food at home was basic. At school, however, he eagerly looked forward to lunchtime. He remembers clearly the day treacle sponge was served. The sponge was soft, golden, and dripping with sticky syrup. The dinner lady poured a ladle of hot custard over it, and the smell alone made his heart race. When John took that first bite, he felt as though he was eating pure happiness. Years later, he would tell his grandchildren, the best thing about school was the puddings. In this video, we're going to explore those puddings, those glorious, comforting, sometimes sickeningly sweet puddings that featured so heavily in school dinners in the 1950s and 60s, and let us start with custard. Custard became the symbol of British school dinners in the 1950s and 60s. Sometimes it was thick and creamy, sometimes a bit lumpy, but always comforting. It was poured over jam roly-poly, spotted dick, apple crumble, or pie. For children, custard meant warmth, sweetness, and joy in the middle of an otherwise strict and cold school day. Even now, when people remember school lunches, the first thing that comes to mind is that yellow custard dripping down the side of a pudding. But what about the puddings themselves? Let's take a closer look at one of the most popular, spotted dick. This was a steamed soup pudding, usually made with dried fruit and spices. The name comes from the spots of soup that would appear on the surface as it cooked. Imagine the scene. It's 1958, and a young boy named David enters the refectory. He takes his place in the queue and watches as the dinner ladies serve up spotted dick with lashings of custard. The fruit glistens, the sponge is soft, and the custard is thick and creamy. David takes a big bite. The flavors are sweet and spicy, and he feels a surge of contentment. He may not have known it at the time, but this moment, this simple pleasure, will stay with him forever. Another classic was jam roly-poly, a steamed pudding made with soup, flour, sugar, and most importantly, lots of jam. The mixture was rolled up, hence the name, and then placed in a basin to steam. The result was a delicious, fruity dessert that was perfect with custard. In 1963, a teenage girl named Margaret recalls eating jam roly-poly at school. She remembers it being sticky, sweet, and a little bit messy, but in a good way. It brought back memories of her grandmother making it for her as a child, and she felt a sense of comfort and familiarity. Then there was apple crumble. This was a favorite among the children, and it's easy to see why. The sweet and sour apples topped with a buttery crumble and served with custard made for a delicious and satisfying dessert. Imagine the scene. It's 1960, and a group of school children are gathered around a table in the refectory. They chatter excitedly as the dinner ladies bring out the apple crumble. The sight of the golden crumble topping and the smell of the baked apples fill them with anticipation. When the first plate is placed on the table, the children dig in. They eat quickly, but not too quickly, savoring each bite of the crumble and the sweet, tangy apples. The taste of the dessert brings back memories of their own kitchens where their mothers had made similar dishes. The children feel a sense of comfort and familiarity, and for a few moments, they forget about the strict rules and regulations of school life. As the 1960s progressed, school dinner menus began to change. Fish and chips were served on Fridays, mincemeat pies, rice pudding, and fruit crumbles. But the puddings remained central to school meals. They provided a sense of comfort and familiarity for the children who ate them. In 1964, a young girl named Susan stood in the lunch queue of her London school. She clutched her tray and whispered to her friend, "I hope it's chocolate sponge today." When the dinner lady finally lifted the lid and the smell of cocoa filled the room, Susan grinned. She took her portion with extra custard and sat down with her friends, laughing as they shared stories of the day. These puddings may seem like a distant memory now, but they played an important role in the history of school dinners. They were a symbol of comfort and familiarity for generations of British school children, and for many, the memory of those sweet, comforting flavors still lingers. This is a custard. Maybe it looks a bit like wallpaper paste, but don't knock it till you try it. For children growing up in Britain during the 20th century, school dinners were more than just food. They were moments of joy, shared laughter, and little pieces of happiness in the middle of their education. And at the heart of many of those moments was a single spoonful of custard. It is important to remember that school lunches in Britain were not just about nutrition. They were social equalizers. Every child, no matter how rich or poor, received the same plate of food. It was a place where friendships were made, where shy children gained confidence, and where teachers sometimes joined in, sitting with the pupils and sharing the same pudding. The dining hall was a theater of life, noise, chatter, spilled gravy, and the endless clatter of spoons. But above all, it was a memory factory. Then, in the 1970s, the school dinner as we know it started to die. Convenience foods began to appear. Chips became more common, sausages too. Puddings remained, but sometimes replaced by yogurt or tinned fruit. Yet the custard held its ground, always finding its way back onto the tray. Children of this era remember pink custard, green custard flavored with mint or food coloring, and sometimes even chocolate custard. loved it. Some hated it, but no one ever forgot it. One boy from Liverpool called David remembers the day green custard was served. He stared at it in horror, but urged on by his friends, took a bite and laughed as he realized it tasted just the same as the yellow one. That memory stayed with him for life. Custard might seem an unlikely cultural touchstone, yet for generations of British people, it has evoked a powerful sense of nostalgia. What is it about this thick, creamy concoction that has captured our imaginations? To answer that question, we have to travel back in time to Victorian England. The Industrial Revolution had changed the way people lived, worked, and ate. Families were larger, living conditions were cramped, and poverty was widespread. Food, when it could be afforded, was often in short supply. Enter Margaret, a domestic servant working in the household of an affluent family. Her days are long and arduous, but she finds solace in the small things, like a warm fire or a kind word from her mistress. One day, her mistress asks her to make a simple dessert, a baked egg pudding. Margaret carries out the instructions carefully, using only the finest ingredients. The dish is a success, and soon other servants and working-class families are making it too. It becomes known simply as custard. As the Industrial Revolution gathers pace, custard becomes a cheap, easy-to-make dish that can feed large families. Working-class women who have little access to fresh fruit or sugar turn to custard as a way of adding a little sweetness to their children's lives. Custard is served in small dishes or teacups and eaten after a main meal. It's a special treat for the children, a moment of happiness in an otherwise difficult life. By the end of the 19th century, custard had become a staple of British cuisine. Its thick, creamy texture and sweet, comforting flavor made it popular with both children and adults. The dish is so beloved that it even makes an appearance at the 1903 coronation of Edward VII, served to the royal guests in the famous coronation chicken recipe. But how did custard go from a simple egg pudding to a national obsession? Part of the answer, no doubt, lies in its simplicity. At a time when fresh ingredients were becoming more readily available, custard offered a quick and easy solution for busy cooks. Its basic recipe of milk, eggs, and sugar could be prepared in minutes, and its thick, creamy consistency meant that it could be served hot or cold, making it incredibly versatile. As the 20th century progresses, custard becomes a wartime favorite. During rationing, when food was scarce and families were struggling to make ends meet, custard offered a welcome distraction. It could be made with just two ingredients, milk and eggs, and a little bit of sugar if you're lucky. And because it kept well, it was a convenient option for working mothers who needed something that would sustain their children through the long, cold winter months. But perhaps the real appeal of custard lay in its ability to evoke a sense of comfort and familiarity. In a time of great uncertainty and hardship, custard was a small, simple pleasure that brought a little bit of joy to people's lives. It was a reminder of happier times, of childhood memories, and of the simple pleasures in life. And so the love affair between Britain and custard continues. From humble beginnings as a baked egg pudding, it has become a national treasure, a symbol of comfort, nostalgia, and good old-fashioned British cooking. So the next time you see a dish of custard on the menu, take a moment to appreciate its rich history and its enduring popularity. You may just find yourself transported back in time to a simpler, sweeter era. Growing up, school lunches were our favorite meal of the day. We cannot tell you how many times we looked forward to the lunch bell. When it rang, it was like music to our ears. After a morning of hard-working class, all we wanted to do was tuck into our lunch. What a treat it was when there was something sweet for dessert. After a savory main meal, few things beat finishing off with something sugary. But British schools are famous for their strange desserts. Some of them sound really good, while others, well, they sound downright awful. Let's take a look at some of the weirdest school desserts ever served in British schools. Spotted Dick. Spotted Dick is one of those classic British dishes that sounds very intriguing. It's a steamed soup pudding that contains dried fruit, usually currants, raisins, sultanas, or mixed fruit. These are the ones that give the dessert its name. You can find spots of color amongst the batter. Although the exact origins are unknown, Spotted Dick is believed to date back to the 18th century. Back then, dried fruit was an expensive luxury item, only eaten by the wealthy. As such, Spotted Dick became known as a rich man's pudding. However, it soon found its way onto the menu of everyday people. By the Victorian era, it had become a staple of British cooking. Nowadays, it's mainly served in schools and care homes. A lot of people look forward to eating Spotted Dick, especially since it's often served with custard. Other people, though, can't understand why anyone would want to eat something that looks like a lump of coal. It's very hit or miss with this one. Eton mess. Eton mess is a traditional British dessert that has its roots in the famous boarding school Eton College. It consists of layers of toasted and crushed meringue, whipped cream, and fresh strawberries. It's thought that Eton mess originated from leftovers after a garden party held at Eton College. This was way back in the mid-19th century. The dessert guy is named from the fact that the final result is a bit of a mess. Despite the somewhat chaotic combination of ingredients, it is a delicious combination that appeals to both children and adults. These days, it is mainly associated with the summer season, a summertime staple at Wimbledon Station. You can even buy edible souvenirs of the dessert, but not everyone has fond memories of Eton mess. Some say that eating it reminds them of childhood bullies and playground politics. Others say it tastes like regret. Treacle sponge. Treacle sponge is a traditional British dessert that is deeply loved by many, but it's also a dish that causes a fair amount of confusion. Why? Well, it's because the recipe varies greatly depending on where it's being served. At its most basic, treacle sponge is a type of golden syrup sponge cake. However, other recipes call for molasses, brown sugar, or even golden syrup. The pudding can be served warm or cold and is often accompanied by custard. In England, treacle sponge is considered a comforting and nostalgic dish that brings back childhood memories of school dinners. However, outside of England, treacle sponge is seen as something of an acquired taste. To many foreigners, the very idea of pouring treacle or golden syrup onto a sponge cake seems bizarre. But to Brits, the sticky and syrupy dessert is a beloved classic. Yorkshire pudding. Yorkshire pudding is a dish that needs little introduction. It is an iconic British dish made from batter and served with meat, typically beef or pork. While it is often enjoyed as a Sunday roast accompaniment, Yorkshire pudding can also be served for breakfast or supper. In Yorkshire, the dish is known as a pudding, despite the fact that it's savory rather than sweet. It is traditionally cooked in beef dripping or other animal fat and is served with gravy. For many people, Yorkshire pudding is a comfort food that brings back childhood memories of Sunday dinners at Grandma's house. However, it is not a dish for everyone. Some people find the heavy, greasy nature of the pudding off-putting. Others simply cannot get their heads around why something so similar to batter would be considered a delicacy. Toad in the hole. Toad in the hole is a traditional British dish, consisting of sausages baked inside Yorkshire pudding batter. It's a hearty, filling meal that is perfect for a cold winter's day. The dish is thought to have originated in the north of England, possibly in Yorkshire. It is believed that toad in the hole was first mentioned in print in 1615. In a book called The Accomplished Cook, there are many variations of the dish, but the basic recipe is simple. Sausages are placed inside Yorkshire pudding batter and then baked until golden brown and cooked through. The dish is typically served with mashed potatoes and gravy. While some people regard toad in the hole as a culinary masterpiece, others are not so impressed. In fact, the internet is full of complaints about how dry and overcooked the sausages can be in school dinners. Even if the dish isn't to your liking, you can't deny that it's a unique and quintessentially British meal. Junket. Junket is a traditional British dessert made with sweetened milk, rennet, and sometimes rum or wine. It is essentially a baked custard with a jelly-like texture that is flavored with spices, such as nutmeg and cinnamon. The dish is typically served cold and is often topped with fruit or nuts. Although the exact origins of junket are unknown, it is believed to have originated in the 18th century. At the time, it was often served in upscale restaurants as a sophisticated and elegant dessert. However, over time, junket fell out of favor and is now mainly associated with British school dinners. These days, junket is often served with custard, which helps to make it more appealing to children. However, it's still not a dish that everyone enjoys. Many people complain that the texture of junket is too slimy or gelatinous for their liking. Others find the flavor to be bland and unappealing. But to those who grew up eating junket regularly, it remains a beloved and comforting dessert. Conclusion: custard. Custard is a classic British dessert that is often served in school cafeterias. It is basically a cooked milk and egg mixture thickened with flour or cornstarch and flavored with vanilla or other spices. Custard can be served hot or cold and is often used as a topping for other desserts, such as fruit crumble or rice pudding. While many people enjoy the creamy texture and sweet flavor of custard, others are not so fond of it. Some people find the taste to be too thick or heavy, while others believe that it lacks any real distinct flavor. Nevertheless, custard remains a popular school dinner dessert in Britain. Its versatility and classic status ensure that it will continue to be served in cafeterias for years to come. Whether you love it or hate it, there's no denying that custard is a quintessentially British dessert. What about you? Which of these dishes did you eat at school? Do you remember the taste? And which one would you choose to eat again? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to leave us a comment down below, and if you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. Also, if you haven't already, please subscribe so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching. See you next time.